Finding genuine connection in today's dating landscape isn't just about swiping right. It's about understanding yourself first. And today's guest has built an entire career around that powerful concept. Alexandra Freeman isn't just a matchmaker, she's a relationship architect who spent over a decade helping high level professionals transform their approach to dating and connection. As the co founder of Introductions Inc., Alexandra has developed what she calls the self discovery before dating methodology, a framework that goes way beyond traditional matchmaking. We're talking about a strategic approach that helps accomplished professionals not just find a partner, but truly understand themselves in the process. Her work has been featured in multiple media outlets. She's helped dozens of clients across the US and Canada create meaningful relationships by focusing first on personal growth. Please welcome Alexandra Freeman to the show. All right, Alexandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really glad to have you on. Looking forward to this conversation. For anybody who doesn't know who you are, why don't you tell them who you are, what your company does, and how you help your clients?
Absolutely. So I'm Alexandra. I'm the co-owner and co-founder of Introductions Inc. Matchmaking. And what we do is we do private matchmaking for high-end clients in the US and Canada and even internationally.
Very cool. And so what is that when you say high end, is that strictly like an income level or socioeconomic status, or how do you sort of categorize or who's the ideal client, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So what may make a matchmaking service more high-end as opposed to more corporate would be adding a sort of personal touch to the matchmaking service. And what we do is we're a boutique service. So we take on a limited number of clients. And the reason for that is because the core of our company is having a holistic approach to matchmaking, right? So making sure that you are in the proper position, place, economically, and socially to be receiving that kind of relationship. So that's what we consider a high-end service taking on high-end clients. It's not necessarily income, but it's
Mhm.
about preparedness.
I love that. And I genuinely think it's underappreciated in today's landscape. I feel like a lot of people, at least in the West, I won't speak for the rest of the world, but it's basically as soon as you get that little bit of freedom from your house, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, people immediately start looking for love, I guess, which in their minds for a lot of people is just kind of this feeling like I'm gonna know it when I feel it. And there's not a lot of conversation around like, but are you actually ready in a number of ways for a serious long-term committed relationship? So what does preparedness mean to you? Like what are the things that you're looking for and encouraging people to do to check those blocks?
Absolutely. So, what we like to say here is some people will say that two halves make a whole relationship, and that is against everything we do here. It really takes two fully developed people to have a successful relationship. So, what we do is we do a lot of internal work. We do a lot of assessment of, am I in a good position to receive a relationship? Am I socially conscious and aware in other relationships in my life? Am I in a position where I'm stable enough to support a relationship? All of these factors are considered when we're presenting proposals to our clients. And at the end of the day, if I don't feel like a client can succeed with my service, then I would recommend some coaching or other services available before we get to the point of presenting matches.
Love that. How in the heck did you end up here? I mean, this is if for me, obviously I'm sure it makes sense to you, makes sense to your clients, makes sense to me. But if you take your average person out there again that's kind of looking for love and you start to break it down in this methodical way, I can sense that there would be a lot of people that are like, this is too mathematical or too, I don't know, pragmatic. There would be some resistance to, like I said, wanting that sort of love at first sight type thing. Like, how did you end up here in a little bit more of a contrarian approach to something so traditional?
Well, I would actually say matchmaking is very traditional. Matchmaking has been around for thousands of years in some way or another. Now, it wasn't always monetized like it is today with professional businesses performing it, but there's always been an aspect of matchmaking in our culture. And the reason for that is dating is a social exercise. So we may think it's just about us and the other person, but in reality, it's about all the other people that surround your life. Now, in this instance, what you're doing is you're reaching out if you don't already have that natural matchmaking aspect in your social life. You're reaching out to a professional who can help facilitate that for you. And especially with the rise of online dating, where it's a very depersonalized kind of thing. You're just looking at a screen, you're swiping left or right. There's no real attachment to it. It takes a lot of screening, a lot of time. It can be exhausting for one person to handle on their own. So you really do need to bring in a little outside help sometimes.
That makes so much sense. Who you mentioned it being more of a social thing in the past, and and I agree. That makes a ton of sense. That you would have had these other institutions that kind of did this for you. I mean, even some cultures explicitly, like you weren't going to get to pick at all. They were just going to be told you marry this person. as so I'm going to be selfish here for a minute. As a parent, I've got now 4 kids, 3 of them are daughters. Who are the people that would usually be involved in that matchmaking sort of traditionally? Obviously, you want the parents in there, but I'm just curious, who else can I surround my kids with that's sort of a positive influence in this matchmaking sense as they get older?
Absolutely. So historically, your family members would be very involved, and they would be mostly involved as opposed to any sort of outside influence. It would be a merger between two families. And that's something we still see today in modern Indian matchmaking, for example,
Mm-hmm.
where it's come into the modern era, but it still holds those tenets of a family bonding. However, if we look at it in a more informal matchmaking sense, what we saw maybe 20, 30 years ago was friendship circles and work circles. So people who were meeting other people at their job, at their place of education, even in high school, depending on where you're spending your time and who you're spending your time with, you were meeting people and you were growing your social circle. Now, as we've moved into an era where your social circle is mostly online and there's a lack of third spaces in the world, you're not meeting people organically in person. And with kind of what I would consider the downfall of online dating recently, where people are becoming more and more disillusioned with it, you have to try to start rebuilding that in an era where society doesn't support those kind of spaces.
Right. So how do we do that? If you're a young person, or maybe not young, but let's just say you're in that dating environment, and you, like you said, you just have no appetite for the online piece. You want to do it in person. You want to try to find somebody. What would you recommend? Where do people need to be? What do they need to do?
Well, the first option is matchmaking. Obviously, if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to spend building your own social circle and doing it the organic way, you can hire a professional who can help facilitate. However, if you do have the time and the inclination, you get into sort of traditional hobbies, interests, things where you can build community. If it's not work or school, I suggest and I usually recommend find a hobby that you're passionate about and go all in on it. Make it a big chunk of your time and personality, and naturally, you will build a social circle around that, which could include romantic prospects eventually. So that's one way that you can kind of make that happen for you. Another way is to not get too locked into online socialization, which is a hard thing to do
Yeah.
in the modern age. I'm aware of it. Also suffer from it myself. But you have to start working on in person socializing, hosting dinner parties, attending dinner parties, doing movie nights with friends, whatever you can do to get yourself offline into the real world, that's going to help you build a robust social community.
I love that. That's great advice. And I'm definitely gonna use that one. I need to start. It's what you said about everything sort of going more online. I've definitely, I think COVID was a huge catalyst for that. I think the world in general just kind of went more digital. And I know in my family, my social circle, we've definitely talked about feeling the pain of that, of like wanting more time with friends, more events with friends, more things that we can sort of spend time together. But somebody has to set it up, right? So I'm going to be really purposeful about that. Something you were saying, oh, it's hard to question me. Oh, I wanted to ask you. So you were talking about preparedness a little bit ago. I'm curious, like when people come to you, what are the main areas where you find people typically the least prepared? Is there any sort of common thread about where you find people have maybe aren't thinking about a particular area as being really important to the relationship, or have just neglected it?
I think that there's kind of two areas where people can sometimes neglect their relationship health, and that's your internal work and your socialization work. So, for internal work, a lot of that can be is not truly understanding your motivations for dating. And something I like to hone in on with my clients is there's no real wrong motivation. There's only dishonest ones. So if your motivation is you want to be an attractive couple, you want to
Mhm.
be a power couple, you don't really want kids, you just want to climb to the top and you want someone to climb there with you. There's no morality attached to that. That's perfectly fine. You just need to find someone who aligns with that. But if you're lying to yourself and you're putting yourself into relationships where you're telling your potential partner that you're looking for one thing, but you're looking for something else, you're setting both of you up for failure.
Right.
So internal work, being honest with yourself, that's the number one thing. And then again, that socialization aspect of making sure that you have robust relationships that are not just dating relationships, because emotional and relationship health is really how you interact with everybody in your life, not just your partner. It will impact each other immensely.
So how do you coach somebody into what you were talking about with lying to yourself, right? Because I would imagine I'm sure there's people that are out there, kind of maliciously being deceptive. Then I imagine there are a lot of people that maybe just haven't ever spent the time to really dive into like what do I want. So how do you help people uncover that? Are you actually sending them through certain exercises? Like what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so for somebody who I feel like is struggling with just pure matchmaking, we do have a coaching program. So it would be me working with them one on one. And how we would explore finding where the pain point is in their relationship building is we would look at past relationships and how we felt about those relationships and any dates that they went on through my service where I can get additional feedback. And that's where we can really start to break down where the expectations from your date and the expectations from the client are not matching and why they're not matching. And a lot of the times it will naturally come about in the conversation that the client will have the realization of, okay, we had different expectations, but I was too busy performing what I thought they wanted to get my own needs met. And then once you hit that point, it's just about figuring out the needs of the individual.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So with you mentioned obviously being a co-founder, and I know you've got some people on your team. So like, what is your actual role? Do you find you spending most of your time in coaching? What like how do you fit into the bigger picture for Introductions Inc?
Yeah, so I have my fingers in all the pies. I'm the head of the matchmaking department, so I do have a client list of my own where I take on clients, usually the ones that have higher needs or specific things that they're looking for. That's who I take on. And then, of course, I have a team who works under me with similar client lists of other types of members. I also am involved. Our company does SEO work, lead generation, and background support for other matchmakers. So we have a whole arm of the company doing that as well. But my focus is mostly on working with clients one to one because that's where my passion is.
Yeah. So what motivated you to start the company?
Yeah, so I got into the industry straight out of school, like 12 years ago at this point. I was actually mentored in by my current business partner, adore him. And yeah, it was just something I always knew I wanted to help people. My mother is a social worker, my dad worked for the government. I was raised around all different lifestyles and different types of people. And I knew I wanted to be a part of people's lives and helping them and developing them, but I didn't know how I was going to do that. And then I got a job working with my current business partner doing matchmaking, which I never thought was even an industry at that age.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is it. I can do this. And I loved working with people. So we did like I said, the SEO lead generation and background support for like 5, 6 years. And then we eventually decided to start our own service.
Very cool. So how have things changed over the last 12 years? I mean, what are some of the big sort of ups and downs that you've noticed in doing this for that long?
Yeah. So this is a really exciting time for matchmaking, actually, because we got to see sort of the rise and fall of online dating,
Right.
which has been so interesting because originally online dating had a lot of pros to it. A
Mhm.
lot of people met their partners there. It was a really interesting new space. There was a lot going on. Young people loved it. And as that rose, in person events declined dramatically. So my business partner was in this industry for even longer than I was, and they used to do in-person events, old school matchmaking where you flip through a whole phone book of profiles, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And once online dating hit, that kind of took a dive because people had a much cheaper, much easier way to make it happen for themselves. So after that, people became kind of reliant on it. If you were dating, you were online dating.
Right.
Almost nobody was going and picking up girls in bars anymore. In fact, if you tried it now, you probably wouldn't be very successful.
Right.
Um, but in the modern era, as there's been some issues with online dating, with botting, with insincere profiles, the gamification of dating, where you're
Mhm.
just swiping left and right. It's a dopamine hit with no real payoff. All of these things are causing a lack of interest in online dating, but the inability to return to traditional ways of meeting people. So we're seeing a huge interest in matchmaking and in person events again. In fact, from younger demographics than we've ever seen before.
And you said the inability to return is that do you mean because these kind of in-person events just aren't really available at the scale they were before, or do you mean like people aren't really wired? Like you were talking about socialization earlier, like people just don't have the skills right now to go out and talk to a human being face to face like they used to.
It's a little bit of both. So, first of all, there's a much more intense stigma around singles events or approaching people in public than there used to be. In
Mhm.
fact, I often don't recommend that my clients approach people in public almost ever because it's not perceived well by most people
Right.
and for legitimate and illegitimate reasons, depending on the situation. So, that avenue has basically been closed off when 20, 30, 40 years ago, that was the way to do it.
Right.
You met someone in the grocery store, you met someone at a
Yeah.
bar, you went to a party and you tapped her on the shoulder. Like that's how you did it. And now there's not really an avenue to make that a feasible way to meet people in 2025. So instead, people are looking for other spaces where they can make that happen. So actual matchmaking events, working with matchmakers, singles events, singles cruises, things like that. We're seeing a really big upswing this year and hopefully next year of people who want to meet in person but don't know how.
Right. That's really interesting. So obviously the move away from technology seems like it bodes well for you and your industry, which is great. But I'm very, very curious. How has AI impacted dating and matchmaking?
Yeah. So basically, there's two avenues that people are going with in the industry. And the first avenue is traditional style matchmaking, which is what we do here, where I'm looking at every profile myself. I'm screening everybody out. I'm talking to the matches. I'm asking them, like, how's your day going? Do you like to run? Because my client likes to run. It's all done with real people sitting down in front of each other. And then the other avenue is a more tech based approach, which is really interesting and does have some benefits. This is what a lot of the online dating sites are trying to do. They're adding AI matchmakers, for example, as add on services to their general dating accounts. There's also been several companies that have launched with full AI matchmakers of their own, where they attempt to do the same thing that I do, but through AI.
Right.
And it'll be really interesting to see if that works out. However, I don't necessarily know if the singles are interested in that, considering there's so much burnout currently from online dating already.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that adding more tech is going to be of interest to those people who are seeking a more personalized approach.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday that there is he was a coach and he was talking about the fact that it doesn't matter how much the AI knows, there is an element of the personal face-to-face interaction that AI just can't do. Like it's just not human. And to your point, we know that we can sense it. And if people are already shying away from the online dating for it for some of the similar reasons, I just don't know where they'd be like, oh yeah, please, an AI matchmaker help me find the person I'm going to marry and spend the rest of my life with. So I could see where there's a huge disconnect there. So have you found any ways to use it in your business where you're finding it really productive, or are you still doing a lot of the things manually?
We prefer a fully personalized approach. So we do have a lot of tech integrations because my business partner is a tech person. That's what he does. That's his whole thing. So we do have integrations that help us, but when it comes to the actual matching, we rely solely on our in-person matchmakers. And the reason for that is, like, for example, I can give you a good example. Today I interviewed a match for a client, and even though she gave all the right answers for them being a good match, I could hear in her tone of voice that she wasn't loving what she was hearing about my client.
Right.
And I could tell there was some elitism about him being a Southern man and
Yeah.
her being from the East Coast. And it's not something that I think an AI would have been able to pick up, but
Right.
it's something I could pick up. And I don't want to put my client in a position where he feels talked down to.
Yeah.
So I ended up rejecting the potential match. Now, that's the kind of thing that's going to be very hard to train an
Mhm.
AI to detect because it's about tone, it's about nuance and comfort level.
Yeah.
And that's something so far only people can analyze, not computers.
Yeah. There's not a rule, right? You can't always say East Coast and Southern doesn't match because it will 50 or 70 or 30% of the time. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think those human elements are what are going to continue. I mean, honestly, I think that kind of element of what you do is going to continue to become even more valuable because AI can't do it, and people are going to be looking for more and more of that human interaction, right? So, how do clients find you guys? I mean, do you do content marketing? Are you running ads somewhere? I mean, how have you guys grown the company over the last 12 years?
Yeah, so we are at our core kind of a marketing company. That's how we got started. So we have over 400 domains across the US and Canada. They're all geo targeted, and we run a bevy of both Meta and Google Ads campaigns to help find potential clients. Now, some of those are for us, and some of those are for our other clients in the matchmaking industry who are also looking for leads. But that is the core way that we introduce our service to new clients. We find that people tend to be really interested in matchmaking in general, and there's no need to really introduce them to the concept because they're hungry for it.
Yeah, no. So personally, I wasn't, I wouldn't, well, I would call it matchmaking, but I had experiences I'm sure many people had where I had dated some people and I never really dated for fun. I always dated to marry. I was always looking for that real relationship. And I was just so fed up. And I finally went to I think my cousin and my mom, and I was like, y'all just pick somebody. Just pick somebody. Tell me who you think it is, and like we'll go. And sure enough, no kidding, my cousin introduced me to somebody, and that was who I married, 12 years ago. So yeah, I'm a big believer in matchmaking, but I'm curious from your perspective when you've got these profiles and you've got these potential matches. I would love to hear you talk about like what's like one thing that people just absolutely have to agree on, or what are the core things that like maybe you don't have the same hobbies and that's okay, but like in your experience, you've got to line up on these like two or three or seven things, or it just will never work.
Right. So the fun thing about that is what your core values are and how important they are to you will vary person to person. So it's not like, oh, you both have to agree on one thing. It's what things are of the most value to you. At your
Mm.
core, what are your core values? So some examples of core values could be a core value of loyalty and family. So that kind of person is never going to match well with somebody who maybe feels like, oh, I can leave a job at any time. Let me just climb the corporate ladder. Let me just hop from place to place, relationship to relationship, no real loyalty in relationships or in their career. So that's something you can analyze is like, okay, I know my client has a core value of loyalty. This person has had 10 jobs in 5 years.
Right.
That's a pain point. Now, that's not an automatic rejection, but it's something to consider in the overall profile health.
Mhm.
So core values will vary person to person. And that's part of the introspection we talked about earlier, where you have to sit down as a person and identify your core values. And sometimes you might not like what you find, but without that honesty, you will never find someone who aligns with them.
I love that so much, and I couldn't agree more. I did a talk in an event a couple of years ago that was all about decision making, but the foundation of it was exactly what you're talking about. It was values, and it was the basic premise was if you know what you value and what's truly important to you, then even the sort of biggest decisions get very easy. And somebody had pressed me on it. They're like, well, what about love? And I'm like, my argument was if you know what you value, it's very easy to meet somebody and decide if they meet those values or not. Like, there's no question. But if you're just trying to answer this kind of nebulous question of like, is this person the one? It's like, well, there's no framework there to be able to decide yes or no. And so I love that. I love that you do the inner work and the values work. That's fantastic. So I'm curious, like, what are you guys? Obviously, you mentioned before we started recording that you're international. What are you guys excited about for 2026? Are there any big goals that you're trying to hit for the company?
Yeah. So in 2026, we're exploring two different new things to add to our service. The first one is an introductory program because we find that people might be a little unsure about our programs, which are traditionally 6 to 12 months long.
Right.
It's a big commitment, it's a big financial commitment. So we're introducing an introductory program that's a little bit shorter, gives you a little taste of matchmaking, and that's a way for people to kind of get the vibe. Another thing we're looking into is we've had a renewed interest in international matchmaking. So, for example, certain clients I have in the US don't really care about borders. They're
Mhm.
like, I'll go anywhere, I'll meet anyone. I have a lot to offer, and I want exactly what I'm looking for, no matter where you find it. So we have done some international matchmaking in the past with out of country matches, and it's something that we're really exploring adding to our repertoire for 2026.
It's really cool. So what are just that you don't have to list them all, but like what are some of the countries that you've sort of found links between or created relationships between in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have quite an extensive network in Indian matchmaking because I did study traditional Indian matchmaking in India for a few years with my business partner's family. So we have a network there. We also have connections with Slavic matchmakers in, Ukraine, Belarus, etc. And then we also have connections in the Thai matchmaking industry. So there's plenty of options for tapping into networks of people that you might not be able to on your own in the US or Canada. You might not be able to reach those singles on your own. So that's something we can help facilitate and help find a match for you, even if that match isn't in your backyard.
Right. So in your experience, what have you noticed? Like what are just some of the maybe the big differences or things that you learn in how these different cultures think about love and intimacy and marriage, like anything that surprised you or that maybe you weren't expecting as you went international with this?
I will say that something I really appreciate about the attitudes of, for example, Eastern European matches is a willingness to make a relationship work.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about core values a minute ago. Something I fight with people in the West is the core values will align. On paper, this person will be a perfect match, but they won't feel butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that other countries tend to be a little bit more pragmatic about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, the butterflies will leave you no
Yeah.
matter what. And then all you'll have left is the core values.
Right.
So I really do appreciate that certain cultures value the core values more than the chemistry. So that's something we sometimes have to coach on with our international matches.
No, that's such a good point. The values versus chemistry. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think 100%. I think we value the, I guess, for lack of a better term, the feeling of it. And I don't know if you want to blame Disney or romantic comedies or whatever for that. But yeah, there's certainly like, I should feel a certain way when I meet the right person. It's like, well, yeah, maybe. But even if you feel that way, you've probably got a 12-month honeymoon period that you're going to feel that. And then what do you have after that? Like, it's going to be just your day to day relationship, right? So that's really interesting. And where
I
the,
like the, sorry.
no, you're good. Go ahead.
The way I like to explain it is chemistry is a bonus, not an expectation.
Mm,
Now, of course, there has to be a base level of attraction. I'm not
right.
saying force it, but if there's not rocket ships and fireworks, that's fine because that's the icing on the cake. What cake flavor is it?
Yeah.
Can you live with that cake flavor till you're 70? Because that's the important part.
Right. Yeah. This is similar to a conversation I was having with somebody about. We talk about business a lot. And I tell my clients a lot of times that like the best businesses are boring. Like if you wake up every day and your business has a fire to put out and there's chaos, and like it might feel exciting, but it's not actually the best way to do it. There should be some boredom to it. And so I liken that to what you're saying about relationships. Like the best relationships are kind of boring. Like we just get along, things are good, we're not at each other's throats, and there's not chaos. And like you said, maybe there isn't rocket ships, but like we're here for each other, we're loyal, we have all these sort of foundational elements of a relationship. So I love that. And I would at some point I would love to have a longer conversation just about Indian matchmaking, strictly for my own curiosity. Like I just love to learn
Oh,
about
yeah.
other cultures. I think
Super interesting.
that is super interesting. But I do love what you said about, I can't remember if this was before recording or not, but you talked about them thinking of it as a merging of families. And I'm definitely taking that away. Yeah, I mean, I've got 10 years at least before my kids start thinking about getting married, but that's such a good perspective because you really are marrying a family, like, on both ends. You're not just marrying a person. Like there's a number of relationships that are developed. So I'm definitely stealing that. I'm going to have that in my mind as my kids start getting old enough to start thinking about dating. So I guess selfishly, like what would you, when I do get to that point where people are starting, like, what would you encourage me to do as a father to set my kids up for success in the best way possible when it comes to finding their match?
Yeah. So when we're trying to set our loved ones up for success in dating, the most we can do is be supportive, be understanding, and be a rock. Because you might not always agree with the decisions your loved one is making, but it's important that they tell you they're making them so that you both can help analyze the situation as it unfolds, right? You can be a sounding board. You can be someone who listens, someone who cares, someone who helps analyze. And at the end of the day, you have to realize it's their decision. So you can guide softly in the direction of self growth and appropriate relationships because it can be really easy to get overinvested. It can be really easy to want to just churn them in the direction that you think is the right way to go. But realistically, they're the one who has to eat the cake for 70 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing you want is them resenting you because they made your decision and then they're stuck with it, right? Or, feel like they're
Absolutely.
stuck with it. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So obviously you're expanding internationally. So on the flip side of the goals and things you guys are aiming at, is there anything in the business right now that you guys are really feeling frustrated by, or challenges that you're facing?
I would say that, you know, the industry is kind of on an up. There's been less challenges this year than there was the last several years.
Right.
Like I said, people are really interested in matchmaking right now. It's kind of having a revival. We've had a lot more media representation than we've ever had before. I think there's like 3 matchmaking shows on Netflix right now.
Right.
So every time I talk to people, they're like, I saw the TV show and here I am.
Yeah.
So realistically, it's kind of on the up right now. I think challenges wise, we are seeing an increase in romance scamming, in fraudulent behavior. So some of our checking needs to be keeping up with the times technologically, making sure that we're doing appropriate background checks as we can and with what information we have available. I think that would be the number one thing to watch out for, especially with the resurgence of AI video and audio,
Right.
making sure that, the matches you're providing are safe for your clients.
Yeah. Wow. I hadn't even thought about that. If you're actually, yeah, if the people you're getting as prospective matches may or may not even be real people, they could be completely, AI generated. Well, what's the motivation there? Are people just using that to get money? Like, what's the end game for people that are in these scams?
Yeah, so a lot of romance scams target older individuals or vulnerable individuals, and usually
Oh, yeah.
for
Okay.
money seeking behavior or
Yeah.
money mule behavior. So you get a lot of celebrity romance scams where they'll take on the persona of a celebrity or just an attractive younger person who's showing interest in an older person. And it's usually a very sad situation where that person sends quite a bit of money to the scammer, and it's always been around. I'm sure you remember the show Catfish on MTV, but as our technology becomes more and more advanced, the scams become more and more advanced, and it gets easier and easier to trick even less vulnerable people who would normally not fall for such scams.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow, that's wild. It's a whole world out there of stuff that I don't we don't all have to deal with on a daily basis. So I'm glad you're out there
Yeah.
fighting the fight. So yeah, I mean, this has been such a good conversation. I'm really glad you came on. I'm curious, like, what would be for anybody who's maybe looking for love or is dating or feeling fed up. Like, do you have any specific advice or guidance or any sort of parting thoughts for them?
Yeah, I would say that as cliche as it is, you have to love yourself first. I know everybody's tired of hearing it, but really sit with yourself, because the people who are most successful in my service are the people who are coming from the best internal perspective and are
Mhm.
loving themselves the most. Those are the people that are getting into long term relationships, falling in love, and having fantastic partnerships that lead through the rest of their life. So if you can try to work on that the best you can, the rest will follow.
Gosh, I love that. Now, are you finding that these people that are in this really good place, do they always tend to be a little bit older or have a little more life experience? Or are you able to find young people that are in that really good place as well?
It can be both. I've had several older clients in their 70s even who, are recent widows who
Mhm.
have that great perspective. And I have had younger clients. I have a really fantastic client in his early 30s right now who is doing fantastically. I think he's going to be very successful with his love life. And part of the reason for that is during our coaching, I found him to be extremely receptive to growth, criticism, and ways to make himself more engaging to be around. He started salsa dancing. He's having a great time, and I think he's gonna be really successful. So it's more about perspective than age.
Very cool. That's awesome. Well, Alexandra, this has been such a great conversation, so much fun. I really appreciate your time and you coming on. Why don't you let people know where to find you or connect with you if they want to reach out and get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find our website for our matchmaking services at introductionsinc.com, and you can find me at Matchmaker Alexandra pretty much anywhere.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes so people can make sure to find you. And again, I just really thank you for your time and I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.